And I pulled his eyelids down, and his eyelids were very white. And I'm like looking at his heart rate's dropping. And I'm like, what did he eat? She was like, nothing. Like he's been with my mom all day. So she goes and gets his bottle. I took it, and I remember like I opened the bottle, and I was like, and I like wanted to throw up, and I was like, what the hell is in here? So I've been a nurse for 25 years. The last 10 of those have been spent in a level 2 trauma center. And most recently, I have started coaching on vicarious trauma for first responders, healthcare professionals, and anybody that's been exposed to somebody else's trauma.
Anelyce Forney is an ER nurse with over 10 years of experience, and in this episode, she shares what it's really like working in the emergency room, from nonstop trauma and life or death situations to the cases that still haunt her long after her shift ends.
I grew up in Kalamazoo, Michigan. So it's a smaller town like south of Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Okay.
Yeah.
What did your parents do for work?
My mom was in broadcasting. She did sales. And then my dad did the same, but then he ended up being a custodian for our middle school. So he started that when I was like, I think like 13. And then he did that for the remainder of his career. So they both were, and my dad did sales too before that.
Who
So,
inspired you to get into the field you would end up taking on later in life?
I'm not really sure. Like I am the first medical person. I have a sister, and she is not medical. So, I I would say growing up, I always had this interest in like helping people. I was very shy though. I was a pretty introverted kid. And I think I was always curious about it. And then I remember, like the series ER back in a long time ago, but like watching that and being like, oh, that'd be so cool. That would be so cool. And I went to Michigan State and got a degree in landscape design, and came home from college and was working and doing that. And I was like, I hate this. Like, this is not what I want. And so I told my parents, I was like, I think I'm going to go to nursing school. And they were like, okay, then. So I was like, okay, let's do this. And so I am an associate degree nurse. The program that I went through was 2.5 years, 3 years. Um, but it was a pretty tough program. And so I graduated, and then I was able to do like an externship in the hospitals, and I could extern in the ER, and I could extern in the ICU and kind of get like my feet wet. And then when I was an extern, I remember being in the ER, and I was like shadowing my nurse, and there was a house fire. And they had brought in like multiple victims from this house fire. And so I was with like her in that room, and I had like walked into the next like trauma bay to grab a supply. And there was a baby in a car seat that had burned and was dead. And I remember being like 19, 20 years old and walking in and being like, that's a dead baby. Like I've never seen a dead baby before. And then that second you're like, and the smell, like the flesh, like all of it, like you were just like, oh shit. Like, and then I had to go back like to her. And so I went back to that patient, and that was like, I think like one of the first times that you were like, oh yeah, like this is real. Like, but not really knowing, you're just like, okay, like let's move on. And you just go on about your business. And so I started to like kind of think to myself, like, I'd like to do ER. I'd like to do ICU, like trying to figure out kind of what I wanted to do after I graduated. And so I graduated and got a job in the ER at a level 1 trauma center. And within 6 months, I was like, I have no business being here in this ER. Like, I am too naive. I am too new. And I just didn't feel like personally, like I needed more knowledge. Like I wanted to grow, and I felt overwhelmed. And so I ended up doing like cardiology, like outpatient stuff. And then I got a job in oncology, and I did chemotherapy. And so I worked, and that was one of the best jobs I've ever had. And it's one of the saddest, but also like the most rewarding. And I started to develop that, like those patient connections and like growing my assessment skills. Cause as a nurse, like we do more than push meds. Like we are the eyes and the ears. I communicate with the doctors as to what's going on. Like, you need me to be able to anticipate what's gonna happen. And I knew that all along, but being even in oncology, like, you have patients that want their treatment. They'll do anything for this treatment because this treatment's gonna save their life. So they would meet the doctor and be like, "I'm fine. My symptoms are fine. It's no big deal." Some of these symptoms can be life-threatening, like diarrhea, dehydration, and if they're not truthful and we keep giving you chemo, you can get increasingly more sick and get hospitalized. So I would have to get really good at asking questions to be like, "Are you sure?" And then, like, trying to help them, A, be truthful, but B, advocate for them to be like, "I know you want this treatment, but I also don't want you to get worse." And it really helped me gain that, like, confidence and that ability to be, like, standing up for that patient. And I remember one of the patients was, getting treatment, and he, had, like, lung cancer, I think. Um, and how it was an outpatient setting, and they all sat in, like, a circle, and so they all got, like, became really good friends and, would talk and stuff, and he was sitting there getting his treatment, and I was, like, talking to somebody else, and he coughed, and I kinda, like, looked over at him, and he coughed again, and as he coughed, like, blood came out of his mouth, and then, like, I looked at him again, and he coughed, and then, like, more blood came out, and then it became very obvious that something was happening, right? And so you're trying to pull the patients away and so I tend to him, and he starts actively bleeding, and the patients are obviously very upset. We're trying to get them away, and I get to him, and he arrests, and so, obviously, we have to call 911 because 'cause we're an outpatient facility. And what had happened was that he had a tumor wrapped around his aorta and it had ruptured. And so he was bleeding out in front of everybody, and there was no saving him. But again, being young and being like, I wanted to help, but I also wanted to protect, like to protect those other patients. And I started to kind of get that itch of being like, I need to do more. Like, I've got to grow some more. Um, and so I applied to the ICU, and I got one of the only day spots that they had available because usually as nurses, it's trial by fire. You start at on night shift and you work your way up. And they had like one opening. And so I got that. And so I worked in a cardiopulmonary intensive care unit for a number of years.
Now, that moment you were describing earlier about the baby, do they prepare you for a moment like that in school?
No. Mm-mm. No, I mean, you're told, in school, you need to, not let things bother you. You need to make sure that it's part of the job. You have to be tough. You have to be able to be kind. What they beat in you basically is that, you have to be, kind and caring and pleasant. And, you have to advocate for your patients, and you have to make sure that, like, the doctor can order the drug, the pharmacy can give you the drug, but if you push the drug, it's on you who's liable. Even though it could be the wrong, like, you're the last stop. So there is no room for error. Like, I have to be on my game all the time. And so, like, those types of things are what they, teach you basically. It's not like, how do you deal with death? Like, yeah, I think we had a class on death and dying, but it was pretty much like, make sure that you're empathetic with the family, make sure you're empathetic with, but like, how do we handle it was never talked about.
What about that time in the ER that made you realize that's not where you wanted to be at that moment in time?
Um, I think it was like I felt overwhelmed, like I felt unprepared and that I couldn't do what I needed to do. And I just really was like, this isn't I know myself and I know I want to be really, really good, and I'm not there yet. And so I had to and stepping back, I felt like a failure. I felt like I was, you know, I'm like, well, what did I do? How come I can't do this? But in the other aspect, hindsight, I needed that. I needed to grow more. And I don't think there's any problem with saying that. Like, no, I'm just not ready. I'm just not there yet.
How physically demanding is it and mentally demanding working in the ER?
I can't even describe it. So, I traveled. So I did ICU for a while, and then I did travel ICU positions, and then I did ICU ER float. And for the past 10 years, I've been in an ER, basically just consistently.
So you decide to go back to an ER.
I did.
Uh,
So I've been I was an ER nurse for the last 10 years I've spent in the ER.
why did you decide to go back to the ER after having that first taste of it when you were younger?
Um, I think probably because having done the ICU for so long, ICU mentality is completely different. We are structured creatures. Like the ICU nurses, like I had a couple patients and I could figure out all day long. Like I trend things, I would connect dots and like that was great. But then ER, the chaos of the ER, like I started there as like a relief nurse and I was hooked. I was just like, "Oh no, this is totally my vibe." Like it's how my brain thinks. I love going from one to the next. Like I love being able to be like, I have a 2-year-old, I have an 80-year-old, I have a trauma coming in, like all of that. I was like, "Oh yeah, no, this." And I had a lot of experience. I mean, I've been a nurse for 25 years. So 15 years in, right? I started to feel like I'm like, "Oh, I can do this." Like, yeah, this works. But it that being said, I don't think I still was mentally prepared for what I would see or go through being in an ER for 10 years.
What do you think is the busiest time of the day in the ER?
All of them.
It never ends, like, there's no quiet?
There really is no quiet, especially in the ER that I work in, we don't have quiet. It was really funny because I used to always think, "Oh, well, like Friday, Saturday nights, man, like we're gonna." On Monday, I swear to God, Mondays are worse than Saturdays because nobody wants to go to work. We are terrible. Monday, Tuesdays are awful. But it also depends on like holidays. Like like November starts to get really bad, November, December. So there's like trends that you can start to see. Um, but yeah, I can say that like even with like COVID was very interesting. And that added a whole nother element that we were unprepared for as a nurse. Um, so yeah.
What do you think's the most common call or the most common thing that someone comes in for in the ER?
Um, Abdominal pain is probably the most common. But again, like as a nurse, like as a triage nurse, if you came into me and you're like, "Oh, I have belly pain," I have to ask you questions to figure out what you're like, how and the severity, how bad are you? Because I'm going to triage you, I'm going to give you an acuity. And I have to ask you leading questions in under 5 minutes to determine, are you going to die on me or are you going to go back to the waiting room? And it's a lot of pressure because you're trying to ask those questions, get truthful answers. And all the while having constant noise. Like you have constant things going on in your brain. So it's not like I can just give you my undivided attention. I have to be able to talk to you, look at your vital signs, know your history, all the while feeling the pressure of everything else that's like going on with us. And so um yeah, it can be a lot. Like especially in our hospital, you have a nurse that sits up front that's the sorter, as we call it. And when you're in that role, your job is to place every ambulance or know every ambulance that's coming in, every patient that walks through the door, plus all 64 patients. And you're watching all of it. And so you're checking in and I'm listening to be like, what did you say? Because you could walk in at 80 years old and be like, my head hurts. And you're like, um, do you always have a speech like that? Because you sound a little slurry to me. Oh, well, yeah, I just have been, my speech has been a little off for a couple. Like, for how long? Yeah, well, you're having a stroke. But it's subtleties because a lot of people don't walk in and they're like, "Oh, I'm having a stroke today." You're like, "Oh, shit, okay." And like, I mean, one of the hospitals I worked at, I was like over on one assignment and another nurse was in a room and she had come out and I happened to hear her say like, I could use some help in here. So I walked in and she had a patient who was like 2 or 3 years old. And she was like a newer nurse and she was like, I don't know, but something's going on. I'm like, okay. And so this patient, mom was at bedside. Mom was like, he's been throwing up for the last couple of hours. I was at work. He started throwing up. And she's like, so we brought him in. And he was lethargic. And a lethargic to a nurse is like, you're not like, can't really lift his head up, not really engaging with me. And so what I do is with kids, I will tickle them usually to try to get them to like respond. And he really wasn't. And like you can pinch, like tickle their little sides, and he really wasn't doing anything. And like looking at him, I looked at the bottoms of his feet, and the bottoms of his feet were like white, like a Kleenex. And I was like, that doesn't look right. And I pulled his eyelids down, and his eyelids were very white too. And I'm like looking at his heart rate's dropping. His heart rate would go from 110 to 50 and all over. And I was like, oh shit, this is not good. This is not good. So I'm asking the mom, I'm like, how long's he been throwing up for? And she's like, well, I guess like maybe a couple of hours. I don't know. I was at work. And I'm like, what did he eat? What did he drink? What did he get into? And she was like, nothing, nothing. Like he's been with my mom all day. I'm like, okay. So then I'm looking, his heart rate's now 40. And so I'm calling for help, and I'm like, putting the pads on him. I'm like, we're going to start CPR here shortly. Because he was, I think, 2 or 3, but his heart rate would go back up. He wasn't sustained. Blood pressure's dropping. So, and I said to the mom, I was like, I need to know what he got into today. And she was like, I don't think anything. She's like, I'll go get his bottle. So she goes and gets his bottle from the car, and she brings it to me, and she was like, here. And she hands it to me, and I took it. And I remember like I opened the bottle, and I didn't even have it near my face. And I was like, and I like wanted to throw up, and I was like, what the hell is in here? And she was like, nothing, like my mom made it. And I was like, no, something is in this. And I was like, it's repulsive. And she was like, I have no idea. And so he's crashing. We're going to start CPR here shortly. I'm like, you need to find out what the hell is in this bottle. And she calls home, finds out it was rat poison. And so he was being fed rat poison. And so, but the thing is that we ask those questions because there are certain things that we can give antidotes to. And if we don't know what it is, then our efforts are going to be futile. So I was like, we were able to give him atropine, sustained his heart rate. We shipped him out, but still like all of that, like asking those questions and being like, holy shit, like this is bad. And then I would just remember like looking at that and being like, holy shit, but same type of thing is I go from him to the next patient. And I'm just like, you don't even have time to process this. Like you're in save mode, and then you just walk out the door, and then you have a violent patient that's threatening to kill you.
Yeah, now, like a case like that, I'm sure you have 9 million questions about the follow-up. Do you ever get that follow-up? Do you talk to the cops? Do you talk to anyone after what
No,
happened?
no.
Mm.
Sometimes we'll get like reports, a very vague report, but we don't ever really get, like I have no closure. Like you just, and in the beginning, I think you normally, I used to be like, oh, I wonder what happened to them. But then it's that detachment. It's like you're just a person. And that's not to be derogatory. That's not to be, but that's how I do my job is I have to look at you. I have to save you. I have to fix you. I have to help you. But I can't worry about you once I've fixed you because I have to go on to this next person that has something completely different going on with them.
Do you find that most patients are telling the truth, or are they dishonest? Or is it hard?
Honestly, I think most of them are telling the truth. I think most of them sometimes just don't know either, like what's going on with them or like what is going on with them. I really have to say that like when teens come in and they've taken drugs or anybody really, I will always be like, I don't care. From here, I'm not calling anybody. I'm not letting anybody know. I don't really care, but I need to know because that's how we're going to fix you. And usually they'll be forthcoming with what they've taken. But sometimes they're not. And you just trial by fire. You're just trying to figure it out.
Now, you are leading into combative patients. Tell us about that.
Yeah. That has definitely escalated, I would say, over like the last, I've been doing this for a hot minute, but I would say even in the last like 5 to 10 years, like the shift is completely different. Like when I go to work, like I never really worried about my safety, but I could say that I would say that my safety is of concern. Um, the violence is out of control, and I feel like a lot of it is because there's no place for them. Like they can go to jail, but a lot of times the jails aren't going to hold them. Depending on what they're there for, it's med clearance. Like they'd send them back to the hospital for med clearance, or if they're drunk, well, they're gonna hang out with us until they're sober. And drunk and violent is hard because you also have rights as a patient, and so I can't restrain you, but yet you're coming at me. And so, like and we are the punching bags. Like, we're the ones that are stepping in to be, like, trying to get them restrained or trying to medicate them and convincing somebody that is not of sound mind to take a medicine to help calm them down. It's a skill that I don't think anybody learns. It is literally trial by fire that you're trying to, like, what angle can I approach? And then we're taught to, like, de-escalate, and that's great, but that doesn't always work. And when you have a patient, like, I can tell you the number of times that I've had somebody stand nose to nose with me and be like, "I will fucking kill you. I'm just here to try to give you some Toradol." Like, really? And I'm like, why? Because again, I'm here to protect and advocate and la 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 la, but I'm being threatened and I've been hit. I had a girl hit me in the back of the head, grab my hair before, all because she didn't like what I would like that I was trying to tell her to stay in her room because I had a 2-year-old next door that didn't need to hear her say the things that she was saying. Like, okay, I get you have, you don't, whatever. I need you in your room because she also doesn't deserve it. And so, like, right, so this bruise and bruise and bruise, and then you have hospital administration that's like, well, we have scores, patient satisfaction scores, and sorry, but you guys just, I think you need to be nicer. I don't need to be nicer. I need to be tougher. Like, we're just like, oh my goodness, like, it's very challenging to feel like you try, but yet, I go home at the end of the night and I drive in silence because, like, I don't want to hear anything. I was telling a friend of mine the other day, I was like, I never realized that there's a hum that exists in my head all the time. I just thought that everybody had that, but I was like, oh no, that's my job. The alarms, the pumps, the screaming, the yelling, like, none of that goes away. And it always just, like, lives with you. And we have really shitting coping skills that we've taught each other, basically. And so we have sarcastic, dry senses of humor, and we're a little edgy, and we're completely inappropriate, but we have to be, because if we weren't, we couldn't do our job. Like, I have to be compassionate to you, but I can tell you that. So I had, this is like a good example, is I had a patient that I was in charge. And so in charge of the ER is that you are in charge of the patients, the nurses, the flow of that ER. You're making sure that that ship doesn't sink, basically. I had done that. I had had, like, multiple deaths that day. I remember it was one of those days where, like, the whole energy was up. And things were just bad. And I remember, like, a death was very volatile, and the family was violent with each other. So we were trying to, like, pull family apart. And so, like, my whole energy, and I was really tired that day. Well, I needed to stay for 16. So I did a 16-hour shift. And I had to stay as charge. So 16 hours, it makes for a really long day. And I got a call that there was a drowning coming in. And I was like, well, I'm going to have to take that because we didn't have much staff. And so I was with that patient that drowned. And it was a child. And so they were able to get pulses back and get them in the trauma bay. And we code them for about 30 minutes and we lose pulses and we are unable to get them back. And so I remember, like, family was present and being with them and showing compassion and knowing, because I have children myself, and hearing the screams. I can tell you, like, a mother's scream will never go away. Like, you can hear that. Like, I can still, like, close my eyes and I'm like, nope, I can hear it. And you're feeling it, but you're not, because you don't feel like, it's like, I should feel this. I should be crying with them. But you don't. You're just like, it's like a very out of body feeling, and, like, holding them and, like, them clinging to you and begging you. And I remember I was like, this really sucks, but I got to get back out there because I've got, like, 3 more people come in, like, I'm hearing all this commotion on the background and then feeling like an asshole because you're like, "Well, no, I really should be present," and it's this very weird conflicting feeling. And then, the ME has to come in, so the medical examiner has to come in, and they have to rule it if it's gonna be an ME case, then that gets a and if not, then they go to the morgue and so on. And so the ME came in and said, "Okay, everything's good. Um, you can take them to the morgue." And they have to go in a body bag. And so I had to put a child in a body bag. And then that's not the first patient I've ever put in a body bag. And it was not the first child, but the family wanted to be present. And that's not, I mean, and so having the family be there and like watching them go through that process of like kissing and like hugging them and stuff and still being like, I should probably, like, it was sad, but it was also heartbreaking, but also not. And it was like, again, like I had just kind of disassociated from all of this. And I'm like, I just can't imagine their pain. I can't imagine that. And I went home that night and I didn't really sleep, but I never sleep because that's just kind of me. I'm just not a sleeper. And then like 3 days later, I remember I was sleeping and I woke up in the middle of the night and I sat straight up and I was like dripping sweat and I was like trembling. And I'm like, what the hell? Hadn't had a nightmare, nothing. And I'm like, what the hell is this? Next night happened again. Next night it happened again. And I was always just on edge and it felt like I just couldn't. And I was nauseous and I wasn't sleeping. And it was all of that. It was that death, but it showed up completely different. And I remember thinking like, and I actually did go to like a debriefing on that. And that's when I was kind of like, no, we go through shit that nobody talks about. Like this is the hidden behind the stuff that nobody wants to talk about because it makes us seem weak. It makes us feel like we can't do our job. And I'm like, but we can do our job. We just should be able to heal. So,
What are some things you wish the patients would understand what you're going through? You know, when they're coming in, they're demanding X, Y, and Z. They have their own problems.
right.
What do you want them to see on your end?
That honestly, none of us want it to be like this. We all want it to be smoother. We want you not to have to wait. We want to get you all seen quickly. We don't want to be abused. I don't want some guy throwing a urinal at my face. But we're trying. And so while we seem like we're assholes, we really aren't assholes. We've just had to be conditioned to flex constantly. And truly, I have to decipher who's the sickest. Like, and so when you come in and I understand that you're uncomfortable, but when I tell you that your vital signs are stable and that you're good to go and wait for 3 hours, I'm not being an asshole on purpose. I'm just saying right now, guess what? You're not going to die. Like, kudos. Because this one over here is not doing well. And so, like, I feel like public thinks that we just don't care and that we're just like, oh, sorry. But like, then the amount of times I've also had people be like, oh my God, she's eating at the desk. Yes, because I haven't eaten since 5 a.m. and it's 3 p.m. and I'm a little hungry. Like, we got to eat. We don't get breaks. Like, we just keep like rolling through. And so, yeah, we're a little hungry.
My cousin was a nurse during COVID in New York City, and she was saying that she literally had bladder issues from holding in
Yeah.
her bladder for so long.
Yes, for sure. And especially with COVID, because of the masks that we would have to wear, that you again couldn't just like sneak a snack. Like you would be like, no. And we have UTIs, we get backaches, we get all this stuff because you can't like just go and especially with COVID or anybody that's in isolation, like you can't just walk out. It's a process. So if you're in it. Like you're gonna be gowned for the the long haul.
Do you think urgent cares are helping to remove some of the strain on these ERs?
No, because most of the urgent cares right now, at least in our state, um, they have a hard time being able to do anything. I mean, they do some things, but if you go there with a complaint of abdominal pain, they're going to probably send you to the ER because they're going to need they'll rule out to make sure you don't have appendix or something else going on. So you're going to get a CAT scan, and they can't do that in the urgent care.
Were people going to the ER just for the flu back in the day before the urgent cares kind of really popped up, or?
Yeah, but they still do.
Oh, they still, even with urgent cares, they
Oh
still.
god, yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
when I'm really sick, I just go to the urgent care, or even on the online telehealth
Right.
doctors. They subscribe the flu medicine. You're
Yeah.
good to go.
No,
Wow.
they will come in and be like, "But I have the flu." I'm like, "I know, and?" Like, "Yep, and it sucks. I've had the flu. It's terrible, but you gotta go back home. Like, you need to be resting."
And
I'm
not
like,
have to wait 5 or 6
"Right."
hours in there.
And not like, and again, it's just adding more to, like, us to decipher and to quarantine and try to keep people away and, like, that kinda stuff. So, yeah, for sure.
What's something that the TV shows don't show about the ER?
Um Oh, that's a really good question. I feel like they don't show probably the intensity between the constant decision making that we have to do as far as like nurses between um like which patient and like figuring out who's the sickest and being like constantly prioritizing and reprioritizing and the work that they do behind the scenes. Like I might give you meds, but I'm also like, do you have placement? Like, where are you going to go home? Like, I can't discharge, so we're trying to like take care of the patient as a whole in the ER, but we also have some patients that are being held in the ER that are like med surge patients because our hospitals are at max capacity. So while we may have 64 beds, 45 of those might be with patients that are admitted to go someplace else. So now I'm operating. So I may have you that has a heart attack. I may have you that is having like admitted for a kidney stone. And then I may have a GSW next door. And like that's a lot of different things going on. And so like I don't think that they show that. And I would have to say like the hospital I work at, like my doctors are amazing. Like our camaraderie and our like we really are a family. And I think that like, while the TV shows like who's sleeping with who and all this other stuff, because everybody thinks that that's happening. And does that happen? It does happen, yes. Um, but
But that's everywhere.
it's everywhere.
Yeah.
It's everywhere. I think really the cohesiveness of our group is pretty impressive.
Can you tell us the violence you've seen with gunshot wounds?
I can. I mean, like it's a lot. It I'm trying to think over the years. I feel like recently, at least in the area that we live in, the gun violence has gotten a lot worse. Multiple gunshots a day. Like we were a couple weeks ago, they were having a ton. And so I live in a city that I feel like we have a lot of violence in general. And so we're seeing, we're having 16-year-olds that are shot. And um, when we have a GSW come in, we go on lockdown. But even then, like the hospital going on lockdown or the ER goes on lockdown because we're trying to make sure that they don't come in and finish the job. But we also don't know like what else is going on in the community. And so it's also one of those things where we get used to it. Like we're like, oh, we're on lockdown again. Okay, well, I'm gonna go grab a snack, like because we get so used to it. But that's not normal. Like we shouldn't get used to that kind of thing. I remember one time I had a patient who walked in and he was like, I've been shot. And I was up front. I was like, okay. Like, I'm like looking at him, I'm like, you look fine. So I like watched him. I was like, oh, where were you shot? And he was like, I don't know. I've been shot. Like, fair point. Okay. So I'm like, get him in the wheelchair. And I'm huffing, like getting him back. And I was like, okay, so like where like moving his arms, talking to me, fine. I get him back to the trauma bay and I take off and sure as shit, he was shot in the chest. And I was like, yes, you were shot. Sure were.
Do you see
But
a lot of those types of injuries where, they come in normal, but there's something seriously
yeah,
wrong?
yeah, a lot of, yeah. Or stabbings or, yeah, where they appear like decent. And then you're like, oh no, things are going to go like awry pretty fast. Yeah. I mean, I had a guy that walked in, same type of thing. It's always when I'm in triage or like when I'm walking out or whatever, this guy, long line of people, and he like walked kind of past and like looked at me and I was like, hmm. And I was like, sir, what's going on? And he was like, I've been burned. And he was like doing something and it arced and it like exploded and he was like like had been burned head to toe, like eyelashes, no eyebrows, like he was starting to swell. I mean, and that's a medical, like we're going to intubate you instantly because I have to protect your airway, the edema, the swelling, all this stuff. And so we scooped him and ran him back. Um, Babies all the time, parents. I had a parent bring a child in. I was orienting somebody. Um, so left her to triage. I was doing something. I came back around and the dad was holding the baby. The nurse had her back to them, which is like one of the major things you don't do. And I like walked in and I was like, "Sir, give me your baby." And he was like, "What?" And I was like, "No, we're done." And so I went running back and the baby was gray. And I was like, like trying to like whap the baby and like wake him up. And then yeah, we started CPR instantly.
What do you think was the oddest thing you've seen?
Oh gosh. I have lots. I have so many. I did have a guy with that came in and said he could shut his hand in the door and he had gauze on his hand. He had a cup and he was like this, and I like leaned over and his finger was in the cup. I was like, we always lead with the finger is in the cup. Like you never have to just tell me. So then I was like, okay, well, let's go. One of the best was so we do a secure chat. So like front can message triage nurse about what things. My friend messaged me and she was like, there's a guy with his dick in a zipper. And I was like, shut up. No. So I walk out there and I was like, he had like sweatpants on. So I was like, okay, fine. So I bring him back and I was like, so like, what brings you in? He's like, I got my dick stuck in my zipper. And I was like, when? And he was like, today. And I was like, well, you have sweatpants on. Like, what do you? And he's like, I cut it. And I was like, the zipper? He's like, obviously. And I was like, okay. Yep. Sure enough, had zipped the whole thing up in a zipper.
Ugh.
Yeah. I was like, do I ask to see? Do I not ask to see? I didn't ask to see on that one. I was like, we're just gonna go back. Like,
How do you keep your composure in those moments?
um, you get really good at it. Like, I mean, I think for the beginning, it's really hard to not like you sometimes have to like turn. There are handfuls. Like I had a guy who had like foot pain, I remember. And the smell, like rotting flesh is a smell that I can smell it a mile away. I'll be like, "Oh yeah, you've got rotting flesh. I know for sure." And his legs were really swollen. And I got him back to get his vitals. His vitals were shit. And I like looked at his legs and I had like pulled his sock down a little bit and maggots started falling out. And I was like, I don't like maggots. Like I can do a lot of things, but maggots I can't do. And I was just like, I'm gonna need a minute for a second. Hundreds of them. Hundreds were falling off of his feet. And you're like, and you have to suck them up. So that was a little tough.
And you probably get people that don't shower
Oh gosh,
or
yes.
aren't clean or long fingernails or anything like that too.
Oh, I mean, I've been clawed by like people who like dig in feces and then they scratch you and you're like, oh, I have purple wiped my face before because I've had somebody spit like GI bleed, like blood from their all over you. And then you're just like, oh, thanks. We're just gonna, yeah. It's like, I mean, bodily fluids don't really bother me that much anymore. You just kind of get used to it, but it's very interesting for sure.
Tell people what you've seen from DUIs.
Um, as far as what would you like to know? We get a lot of DUIs for sure. We do a lot of like breathalyzers or like blood alcohol tests. I would say that I had the one kind of sticks out was she was a passenger and the driver was drunk and the driver crashed and they were going like 90 on exit ramp and she was shoved underneath the compartment, like where the glove box is, like she was shoved underneath there. And it was a prolonged extrication, so it took them a really long time to get her out. They were able to get her out and they got her to us and she was completely unconscious and maintaining her airway. So you can be unconscious and still breathing, but there's like we assess different things to see, like, are you gonna decompensate? And she had a moan, and, patients that have head trauma or brain injuries have a certain moan to them. There's a certain cry, there's a certain pitch, and as soon as you hear it, you're like, "Oh, fuck." And she had that moan, and I was just like she was, like, in her 20s, and I was just like, "Ah, shit." And her neuro status started to decline, and, we intubated her, and they were gonna do a craniotomy where they're gonna cut a section off of her head, and they were gonna try to make room for swelling and see if they could try to help correct this to prolong. And family was at bedside by this point, and to do a craniotomy, you have to shave their head. And, she had hair that was, like, down to here, like, the most beautiful, like, black hair, and I remember being in there and, like, shaving her head and being like, "This is so fucking unfair," and they couldn't find the driver ran.
He ran out of the car,
Yeah, his boyfriend.
and I'm guessing not a scratch on him, or
No, and nowhere to be found.
does that ever make you wonder why things like that happen?
Yes, and that adds, like and that adds, I think, too, to, like I said, I have 2 teenagers, um, and, like, my hypervigilance with them, like and I try not it's a very double-edged sword, like, my kids will always be like, "My mother," like, I would have to be damn near dead for her to, like, because 'cause I'm always like, you're fine, like, you're not bleeding, you're fine." But in the next breath, I'm also like, life is so fragile, like, so I'm very like, protective of them to be like, "I don't want anything bad to happen to you, like, make good choices." I used to always tell them when they were little, I'm like, "You have to protect your brain." Like, of all the things, broken bones I can fix, but I can't fix your brain. And so it's like that when you see that, it makes you that much more anxious and worried. Like, she got in a car with him, not thinking that this was like, she's not gonna live, and, like, all because of his shitty choices. And so, yeah, it is very hard because I really and I think that also goes into, like, my point of like, how I view the world in general. Like, I am jaded for sure. Like, there are days when I'm like, "This is stupid." And I don't have that innocence about me, or you watch people sometimes and you're just like, "It would be nice to not know the shit that I know. It would be nice to not see the things that I've seen." But I also am like, "Eh," but it gives me a little bit of an edge, and it is, but yeah.
How are you able to balance a personal life with that? I mean, say you go home 6 p.m., dinner's on the table, but you just came from that type of scene.
Right.
How do you do that? How do you go and sit at that table normally?
Um, well, ironically enough, I'm the one making dinner. Um, and about 5 years ago, honestly, I got divorced, and in that process of getting divorced, I realized that the coping skills that I had been using, uh, sucked because I couldn't manage it, and I managed with alcohol, um, Lucky Charms, and Doritos was basically what I lived off of because, I mean, like, why not, right? So and I would, work my ass off and come home, and I remember feeling like the chaos of work felt better than the quiet of my home, and, like, walking through that door and being like, "I don't have the capacity, but I need capacity because I have 2 kids waiting for me, like, I've gotta figure this shit out." And one particular day, like, I would try really hard, but I felt like I was always just one moment away from, like, losing my mind, but I would try not to lose my mind, so I would just shove it down and shove it down and shove it down. And then when my kids weren't around, then I would be drinking with my girlfriends and unloading everything, but that's not healthy either. And so, I remember I'd come home from work and I was pissed off because, of course, I was like, "Could you, like, do the 5 things?" And mind you, they weren't really little children, but they were young enough. They're not gonna do the things I would like them to do. Like, that's to be expected. And I marched upstairs and I was bitching all the way up the stairs, and I'm like, like, "I asked for, like, 3 things in this house, like, nobody can help me. Nobody can help me." And, they both were like, "But" my daughter was like, "But mom, I had, like, a really bad day at school." My son was like, kind of the same thing, and I was like, "God, like, enough." And my son was like, "Nobody in this family gets to be upset but you, mom." And I was like, "What?" And I like, "That's not true." And I go in my bedroom and I was like, "Oh, shit. maybe that is true. And, like, to have your 10-year-old, like, call you out like that, you're like, "Okay, I think I gotta change something." Like, I could see that my shitty coping was affecting them, and I know that I didn't want that to happen. Like, um, and I didn't want them to feel like I wasn't a safe place because of, like, "Why the hell am I doing this?" Like, this job isn't worth that. And, so I worked with a coach and a therapist, and I started to kind of try to figure out why I was broken and how to fix my shit. Um, and then they kinda helped me realize that, like, chaos is where I love, but I have to be able to manage my chaos. And, so it's been a long process and I'm not by any means perfect, and I still lose my shit, but, I decided to become a coach, after working with them. Um, and I've been spending the last couple of years building a business up around helping first responders and healthcare professionals understand vicarious trauma because that's what we go through as witnessing other people's trauma becomes like our trauma.
Do you find that that trauma is normally caused by one specific case or incident, or is it just built up over time?
It's prolonged exposure. So vicarious trauma is like a slow burn. So it's not like one single event. It's not like the one car accident or the one whatever. Um, it's literally, like the violence, it's the sad patients, it could be just the constant demands, like all of that, and we're watching everybody's worst nightmares. Like I remember I had a patient and he went into cardiac arrest, he collapsed at home, wife started CPR, she called 911. They lived really far off the road. It took EMS a while to get there. They got there, they were working him, they got pulses back. Um, she had to ride with. That's not usually how that works. A lot of times, like EMS transports the patient, the visitor drives separate or police. But for this circumstance, she drove or rode with them. He lost pulses again. They got pulses back. Get him into the trauma bay. We put her in the waiting room. He codes multiple times. Ultimately, he dies. We bring her in. She's obviously very, very upset. She's begging for everybody to save him. She develops chest pain. So now she has to be a patient. Um, we do the workup on her, and they ended up having to admit her because of broken heart syndrome, which is actually something that is true. But the stress of his death was starting to cause her changes in her EKG, cardiac enzymes. So we have to monitor her to make sure she also isn't going to have a heart attack. I went in to see her because I was the primary nurse of her husband. And I remember like looking at her and she looked at me and she grabbed a hold of my arm and pulled me close to her. And she was like, "Bring him back." And I was like, "I'm sorry, I can't." And she was like, "No, you're going to go bring him back. You didn't do enough." And I was like, "I'm really sorry. Like, we did everything we could." And she was like, "He's not dead. You're going to go bring him back for me." And I was like, I can't. I'm really sorry." And she was like, "Bring him back." And it was the cycle. And I was like, and so to hear that over and over again, and you're like, "I'm really sorry." And then, like, I would try to leave and she would grab a hold of my arm again. So I would sit there with her and have to do it all over again and do it all over again. And I wanted her to understand and I wanted to like, but you also can't. And just going home and again being like, "Oh my God, I suck," And then it gets like that. That's where your spiraling of thoughts comes into play of like, "I'm not good enough. I suck at this." And it's funny how it will blend into other things in my life of being like, "I'm not a good enough mom. I should do more. I should work harder. I should." And then it's like that perpetual cycle.
In a career like this, how do you measure, I guess, a successful day or a successful shift when it's just one after another after another? Is there any way to look at it in a positive way?
Um, I think some like I will do like the good turnouts. Like if I've had a good patient outcome, then I'm like, or a good catch. Quite honestly, if I have a good catch, if it's one of those things where like I I saved somebody, I will mentally be like, "Yeah, good job." Like I did that. Like, I connected those dots before they showed up. Then I feel pretty proud of myself. Or I love children. I adore children. And so if I have like a baby that smiles at me, I'm like, that's all day. Like I'll take a giggly baby all day long. So yeah, but other than that, no. Like I feel like as a whole, nurses are very humble. I don't like accolades. I don't want you to tell me thank you. I don't like it makes me uncomfortable to have somebody be like, you did a really nice job today. It's my job, thank you. And I think we are, as a group, are like that because it's like, it's just next day, next day, next day.
Who do you think about more, the ones you save or the ones you don't save?
Um, Probably the ones I don't save. The bad ones that you're like, God, that's not fair. Like the kids, the young ones. Um, or like, like the ones that pull on your heartstrings. Like I remember a patient, he I think he had a heart attack. He collapsed at work and we were able to get him back and he had to go to the cath lab because he was having a widow's maker MI heart attack. And his wife couldn't see him before he went back. And we got him back and she came in and she was obviously very shaken and she was looking through his wallet and she was like, "Oh, he has his key." And I was like, "Yeah, I saw that key." And she's like, "It's his lucky key." And she was like, like, and she put it like and held on to it. And it's just those little moments that you get to see like that rawness between like a husband and wife and those little things that you're just like, oh yeah, that sticks. That's those ones stick with you for a long time. And wondering like, I wonder how did they do? Like,
What do you see as the worst drug affecting America right now?
um, oh, I mean, fentanyl. I feel like we see fentanyl, heroin, a ton of heroin. It's the mix. It's like when they have like things laced with fentanyl. Um, I would say that like we always can tell when there's a bad batch. When we have multiple overdoses coming in, you're like, oh yeah, there must be another bad batch going out. But I think it's a lot that it's people that are naive to drugs and get things that are laced with something that they have no idea. Like that's but I would say fentanyl is pretty prevalent, at least in the area that I work in.
Now, those cases that do make it to the ER, were they issued Narcan first or
Can be, yeah, usually. Yep. So
and they still have to go to the ER after that?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, and that's if EMS is called and even if a bystander gave them Narcan and if EMS gives them Narcan, then they'll come to us. But I mean, that's also fascinating is that you can be in cardiac arrest, given Narcan and discharged within 45 minutes. And I'm like, your heart wasn't beating 45 minutes ago and now you're out the door. Like, I don't know. Like to me, I'm like, that's insane. But yeah, I mean, that's happens all the time.
Now, say you have a case of a drug overdose or someone that was drunk. Is it your job to call the parent when there are young people involved, or just, I guess, anyone in general?
No. Nope. Mm-mm. And like if you are under the age of 16, we have to get parental consent anyway. But that usually like there are standards and that privacy things that if you're over the age of 16, 17, no, we don't call anybody. Mm-mm.
But if you're under 16, you can't operate until you call a parent?
So
Or?
we will, if it's an emergency, we will.
Okay.
Yep, that falls under like life-saving measures. But if you just show up high and you're 15, like it gets a little, we have to be cautious about what we're doing. Younger, like 10, yeah, we have to have parental consent and we'll have to call the parents. But thankfully, we don't really get that a whole lot.
What do you think's been your best day on the job?
um, Best day on the job. That's a really good question. I would say that's a really good question. I would have to say that there was a baby that came in, and they were seizing, and like the parents, like this was like a new onset seizure. It was like a febrile seizure, um, and the parents were obviously very distraught. Um, and we were able to stabilize the baby, but it was one of those days where like shit wasn't hitting the fan all day long, and I was able to like help the parents and, like, educate them, and the baby ended up getting transferred to a different hospital, um, because they were still very sick, um, but the connection, like, the closed loop, like we were talking about earlier, like, you never get to, like, close that. It was impactful to actually be able to talk to them, educate them, and help them feel like they had, like, a better understanding as to what's going on, and you could see that their anxiety went from, like, maybe a 10 to, like, a 6, and the patient started to stabilize, and I felt like I did a good job. Like, it was one of those where you're like, "That was, like, a good day." Like, that makes me feel happy versus, like, the days where it's just constant chaos and you don't really you're just surviving. You're just trying to get through your 12.5 hours.
What do you think's been your worst day?
Um, I had a murder-suicide, so I had 2 patients that came in from that, and one was a child and one was a grandmother, and, meeting them in the meeting her in the ambulance and, seeing her injuries were pretty catastrophic, and I won't go into detail, the grandma's were equally as bad. Um, and then stabilizing them and then getting a call that there was a husband-wife, motorcycle accident that were coming in and, they both were having active CPR. And so I had 3 trauma bays, 2 of which are currently being used with those first 2 patients, so I have to pull those 2 patients out, get them someplace to pull in these 2 patients that are actively arresting. We work them for 40 minutes, they both die. They're from out of state, so I have to contact their family and let them know that their family members have now died. I get another call that there's another MVA coming in that is arresting. So to try to pull that out, put that one in, the mother shows up of the child and she's in a completely catatonic state because she was the one that found all them had come home to all of this scene. And like I've never seen somebody that is when I say catatonic, like there was no movement, like there was nothing, and just like the stillness of her body and being like, this is terrible. Like, and then I think in that day too, we had, I think probably like a GSW that came in all in that 12-hour day. And I remember like leaving and I'm like, I don't think I'm going to talk. I don't think I can speak to anybody today. So that was a really bad day.
When there's multiple people coming in at the same time, is it all about good, proper communication of who's going where to help who?
Yeah.
And how in your mind, you're someone that wants to save everyone, how do you decide who goes where or coming off of your victim to go to the next, you know?
So thankfully, like we have a team of nurses and doctors. And I was in charge that day that the murder suicide happened. And it's so prior to like it's knowing. So I have like I know how many docs I have on. I know where like I have all these patients. So I called the housewide supervisor and I was like, this is what's coming in. I'm gonna probably if you can give me another nurse like from the floor, because sometimes we can like it's not really like an MCI, which is like a mass casualty, but we I could delineate, like I could delegate a nurse that maybe doesn't have ER experience, but is just a nurse to go here. I mean, not just a nurse, but to can handle this. And I take my team and I'm like, okay, like you two here, you two there, one nurse there. And my trauma docs are outstanding. So they're like, I know I can manage these 2 patients. And so it's all about flexing and being like, can we force discharges? Like if you don't need to be here, you're out. But then that's the other thing is those patients in the waiting room. Now you're all gonna wait because and we might have sick ones out in the waiting room. So that nurse out front is now rolling through the labs, the vital signs, the chief complaint to see like who of them all is the sickest. Where can I put that sickest? Because I can't put them over here because we have all of this going on in this pod. And so everybody has to flex to be like, okay, well, we can discharge these 2, we can get that one back. And so it's like the teamwork is outstanding. And it's all about like I have to be able to communicate to and it's closed loop. Like we constantly talk in closed loop communication of like, I'm gonna do this. Okay, so you're gonna do that, so I'm gonna do that. Yes. And so we repeat it back to each other because that's how we know, because there's so much talking. And I mean, and that's the other thing is that I'm not afraid to be like, shut the hell up. Like if you don't have a point or a purpose, you need to go. And I can become pretty bitchy pretty fast if I need to. to get my point across and to get like I get very laser focused to be like shut the hell up and get out of my way.
A lot of law enforcement I talk to share about how, mental health used to not be prioritized in their field and it was frowned upon. And there's been an evolution of that over the years.
Yes.
Do you see that in the healthcare world since when you first started to present day?
I do, but I don't think it's good enough yet. I don't, but I know that we talk about it, and that was kind of why I started to talk, and do presentations and coaching on vicarious trauma because I feel like there's still, like with mental health, there's still a stigma to it that if you say that you are having a problem, that you're weak, and that's not true at all. I feel like there's a judgment that nobody wants to talk about it. Um, and I feel like they'll talk about debriefings or like, like what went good and what went bad. But I'm like, that's not talking about how you feel. That's talking about like the situation. Did labs show up when they were supposed to? Has anybody talked about the fact that when you emotionally detach and you are compartmentalizing all of this, that you're like fragmenting your emotions, that you're learning to disconnect your mind and your body. And when you do that, you start to create like this separation and you lose self-trust. You lose the ability to know who you are. And like that's the breakdown that nobody's talking about because I don't feel like I think what we talk about is like, well, you should do yoga, or you should meditate, or, go for a walk. I don't want to walk. I don't want to lay on a yoga mat and close my eyes. Like, hell no. I run because I don't like to sit still. And so running became cathartic for me. But then I was like, and all I do is run. Like, I gotta stop running. But so no, I think that there's a lot we can do, and that I think there's a lot we should be doing for our first responders and for the healthcare workers and for, fire, police, EMS, social workers, that we see all this stuff like Department of Health and Human Service, like CPS. Like they go in and see things that nobody should see. And then again, it's just like, well, you're stressed and you're anxious. Well, no shit. Yeah, we are. But I've I feel like we can learn healthy coping skills, but we have to learn like our bodies first. And as like holistic as that sounds, like there's like science behind why this works.
We hear about the suicide rate for law enforcement. What's it look like for healthcare?
I don't know a percentage, but I'm sure it's higher than what we would like to think about, for sure. I would say even like I know our substance abuse rates are out of control too. And I think that there's a lot of that, like that silent suffering, and that, we just suck it up and we just keep sucking it up. And so yeah, I wish I knew a statistical rate for the suicides, but
Have you lost friends over the years?
mhm, yep. And it's hard to say, but yeah, we have for sure. And it's like, or addiction or something like that. And it changes, like, and it was really funny because before I came on this podcast, I was talking to a group of my good girlfriends, and I was like, man, like, I have a really hard time telling stories. Like, I have a really hard time. And I'm like, is it because I'm old? Like, I can't remember shit. And they were all like, no, I can't remember shit either. And like, when we get together, sometimes we can like pull, but it's because we've blocked them out. And I think first responders would probably be the same. Like we have those calls, like, those ones that you're like, oh, I remember that. But I think for the most part, we just learn to like ignore it.
I think it's something too that people aren't normal discussing with.
Yeah.
Like if you're at a family holiday party, you're not going to ask someone that's a cop what his worst day on the job was, and either you're too afraid to ask, or you're just society trains you not to
Sure.
ask or talk about it unless it's something that was seen on the news and that they were working that case. In which point they probably won't even talk about it to begin with.
Right. It's funny you say that though, because I've been in situations where people are like, oh, tell me your worst thing. And I'm like, you don't want to know my worst thing. Like, or like, what did, like, what do you do? Like, what's an ER nurse like? And you start to talk and then they're like, and then you're suddenly like, yeah, nobody gets me. Like, I should just be quiet. Or our humor, like we're jaded. And so I have been in many social situations where I'm not with fellow like nurse friends, and you're just like, think I'll just keep my mouth shut because they're all like, "You're crazy."
Yeah, it's really interesting too. Like we'll post a clip of a cop describing his worst day on the job, and so many comments are saying you're not supposed to ask a cop this, and
Uh-huh.
obviously this format's different because that person knows that that question, is going to
It's
come.
coming.
That's why they come on the show because they want to talk about it. But it's
Right.
interesting to see how many people, aren't comfortable with having that answer being, put out there, or
Yeah.
just society saying you don't ask this. That's part of the problem there too, because you're
Right.
not open to talking about it.
Right, exactly, because, like, there has to be some acceptance that, like, yeah, we do see shit, but that doesn't make us bad, that doesn't make us, like, flawed. I mean, and there are and for sure, like, I would say, like, I don't wanna talk about it, like, I'll talk about something else. But I think recognizing that, like, nursing as a whole has changed in 25 years. And not to say that and med surg nurses go through shit too, like, they have terrible staffing ratios, like, they don't have the resources that they need. Like, it's collectively, like, nurses in general. Um, but I would say, like, the ER is a completely different beast than what people think. And like we talked about earlier, but, like, the violence and, like, just the physical nature of it is just I didn't sign up for that. And while I expect sometimes it happens, it shouldn't happen all the time.
Do you feel like those ERs are becoming safer to work in from a security perspective?
I think, um, I think they try. I know that our hospital is trying, um, but I think hospitals also have a standard that they have to follow with, like, JACO and certain accrediting bodies that I think step in the way and make it really challenging. But I know that our security cares about us, and I know our security will protect us to the best of their ability. But it wasn't always like that, for sure.
Yeah, I know growing up when I'd go to the ER, sometimes if you go at like 2 a.m., there wasn't
Right,
a cop in sight.
right.
I'm sure it's a lot different now, but
I mean, it is. It definitely is. They are, um, the shift is happening now where we have dogs and we have, like, we're getting bulletproof glass, which is sad to say, but exciting because it's like, whoo, like we're sitting ducks. I remember it was Christmas a couple years ago and I was out front and my girlfriend was next to me and she was the triage nurse. I was the sorter. And then we had like a registration girl. And there was a patient that walked in and I heard him screaming. And, for whatever reason, they opened like, so we are a locked unit. So, like, when you come in from the outside, you have to go through security. These doors don't open unless they get security opens. For whatever reason, they thought it was a brilliant idea to open the door for this guy. So this guy walks in. Okay, so it was Christmas time and we were having an ugly sweater. So I was like dressed like in my ugly sweater and my girlfriend was dressed as a Christmas tree because we were trying to have some holiday fun. So she had her hood up and looked like a Christmas tree. And this man barges in and he is all of like 6'4" and has this boisterous voice. And he was like, "Attention, everybody." And I looked at her and I was like, "We're gonna get shot." And she was like, "I don't want to die as a Christmas tree." And he was like, "Jesus is alive." And I was like, "Ah, crap." And so, I like get up and I was like, "Hey, sir." And he is like thrashing through and I'm like, come here," like trying to grab this giant man while he has a Christmas tree talking to him. Like, I was like, we are probably like the worst things happening to him right now, but we had to like subdue this man, just her and I, and try to get him into like the back to like get him and it like like he was throwing us around like we were dolls, like all over the place, and we're like trying to get him to like so yeah, like that's just like normal.
do you think working in this career gives you perspective on life?
Yes, 100%. Yeah, yep. I mean, I have a new appreciation for everything. Like, I appreciate mental health disorders, not that I didn't before, but our mental health system is broken. Um, we don't provide enough help for people, and I mean, I've had 10-year-olds stay in the ER for months because they have no place to go. Could you imagine being 10 years old and staying in an emergency room for 3 months because your parents don't want you and you have no place to go? And you have mental health disorders because you have parents that don't care about you. Like, that's terrible. No child should have to stay there. Like, or family members that beg you to help their loved one, and you're like, "I'm sorry, like, here's a list of resources and put them right back out when they know that something bad could happen to them. Like, it's terrible because that's not humanity. Like, we should be trying to help these people, but our system is and healthcare is broken.
What do you think is going to be the biggest change in the incoming years?
Um, I hope that it gets I hope it gets better and that it gets more streamlined and that the healthcare system starts to figure its self out, like how to admit patients, how to get patients discharged, like a better process. But I don't think it's going to get better. I really don't. I think it's going to continue to stay like it is. Like, I think, I hate to say entitlement, but I think some patients have entitlement. I think that there's this like air of like, I'm coming here, I deserve this, I want this. And healthcare doesn't, like, we have a mismatched system, right? We've got wants and then we've got what we can deliver. And when this keeps growing, you're just going to get more and more animosity. You're just going to get more and more resentment. And you've got bigger drugs and bigger violence. And it's like, I personally don't think it's going to get any better, but that's just me.
After saying that, what would you tell someone that's going into this field? Say, they're right in college right now, they're getting ready to make that leap. What would you say to them?
It's funny, I have my daughter is 17 and she shadowed me a couple of times in the ER and she's like, "Oh, I want to be a trauma doc mom." And I was like, "No." She's like, "Oh, come on." Like, she's like loves it. And she's like, "No, mom." And I just am like, you have to recognize, like, if you're doing this, like, your why has to be a pretty good why. Like, and yes, it's about saving patients, and yes, it's about caring for others, but you have to make sure that, like, you recognize that this is a thankless profession, that I find gratitude because I know that I can still help somebody, but I wish I would have learned way back when to not lose myself in the process of it. And I think that's what I would tell her too, is like, you have to make sure that you're staying true to who you are and recognizing that the shit you see will change you, and like how to navigate that, because um it's not worth it. It's not worth losing yourself for.
And if you could go back in time, would you choose this career over again?
Um I would. I probably would. Yeah. I mean, there is something about, like, the medicine aspect that I love, and the people. Like, I know I make a difference, and I know that, as much as I hate it at times, um, I can't imagine doing anything different. Like, that's how my brain works. So, yeah, I would.